Tom was a simple outdoor boy who loved staying close to nature. He spent most of his time walking through tall trees, sitting near the river, or listening to the sound of the wind. His home was a small wooden cabin on a hill, far from the town. The cabin looked old, but it felt peaceful. It had a gentle smell of wood and pine leaves. Tom lived there with his mother, who worked hard every day to keep their life steady and calm. During the summer season, the hill became warm and the sunlight stayed strong for long hours. The cabin trapped heat inside and made the rooms feel heavy and uncomfortable. Tom often found it hard to rest after long outdoor walks because the air inside the cabin felt warmer than the air outside. In winter, the cabin became too cold, and they had to burn a lot of firewood to stay warm. Tom wished he could change this, but he did not know how. Tom was not a talkative boy, but he noticed things that others ignored. He observed small details in nature. He watched how birds built nests with care, always choosing a cool shaded spot for summer and a warm hidden spot for winter. He saw how animals created their shelters using leaves, stones, and soil. They shaped their homes in smart ways so the weather did not trouble them. Tom admired this and believed there was always a simple trick hiding in nature. One afternoon the heat was strong. The sun stood high in the sky, and warm wind brushed across the hill. Tom stepped outside the cabin and wiped sweat from his forehead. He walked slowly around the cabin and looked at the walls and roof. The sunlight touched the roof directly without any covering. Tom realized something important. The roof took the strongest sunlight during the day. The cabin did not have any shading or cool barrier above it. The heat entered through the roof and stayed inside for many hours. Tom continued walking around the cabin. He stopped at the small shed where they kept tools and extra firewood. A long, narrow wooden board stood leaning against the shed. Behind it, the ground was cool. Tom touched the soil and felt a clear difference in temperature. The board blocked the sunlight and protected the ground. That moment gave him a quiet spark in his mind. Nature gave shade to protect from the sun. If shade could keep the soil cool, maybe it could help the cabin too. Tom wondered if he could create a simple layer over the cabin like the wide branches of a tree. It was only a small thought, but he took it seriously. Later in the evening, Tom sat near the steps of the cabin. The daylight was softer now, and the air slowly became cooler. Tom looked at the large tree next to the hill. Its branches covered a wide circle of ground with shade. He walked to the tree and placed his hand on the soil under the shade. It felt cool and comfortable even though the day was hot. He stayed silent for a moment and thought more deeply. When Tom returned inside the cabin, he shared his thought with his mother. She looked at him with hopeful eyes. She always believed that he had a bright and simple mind. Tom said he wanted to find a natural way to keep the cabin cool in summer and warm in winter. His mother encouraged him gently and told him that she trusted his ideas. Night came quietly. Tom lay on his bed but could not fall asleep because the room was still warm. He sat up and listened to the sounds outside. Crickets chirped in the fields and the soft wind moved through the trees. Tom walked to the back door and opened it slowly. A cool stream of air touched his face. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. This cool air came from the forest behind the cabin. It was fresh and calm. Tom stayed at the back door for a long time and studied how the air moved. He crouched down and noticed that the back side of the cabin had a small gap under the wooden wall. It was not big, but it was enough for some air to pass through. If he could guide this cool forest air into that gap, the inside of the cabin might become cooler. It seemed too simple at first, but Tom trusted simple ideas. Early next morning, he woke before sunrise. The air outside was cold. He walked around the cabin again and looked for something he could use. He found old wooden boards stacked near the shed. They were still strong enough to stand upright. Tom used these boards to form a narrow path from the far side toward the gap under the cabin. He placed stones at the bottom of the boards so they would not fall. The boards stood in a gentle curve, facing the direction of the cool wind. Tom believed the wind would follow the boards and slide toward the gap. When his mother woke up, she stepped outside and saw Tom working with focus. She asked him what he was building. Tom explained his plan with simple words. She nodded and told him to carry on. She liked watching his dedication. By the time the sun rose fully, Tom had finished his small wind path. He stood back and waited. At first nothing seemed different, but as the heat slowly increased during the morning, he felt the slightest movement of cool air sliding under the cabin wall. It was not strong, but it was real. Tom went inside and touched the floor. The air felt cooler than before. His mother smiled because she felt it too. The cabin did not feel as heavy as it usually felt during summer. Tom walked to the window and looked outside with quiet pride. His simple idea worked, even if only a little. The next few days passed quickly. Tom kept observing the cabin and the airflow. He adjusted the boards to guide more wind. He made the path wider and lifted some stones to change the angle. The airflow improved. Every day the cabin felt cooler inside. It became easier for Tom and his mother to rest during the afternoons. The change was small but clear. Tom felt excited because he believed this was only the first step. Nature always had more answers, and he wanted to learn them one by one. He wanted the cabin to stay cool in summer and warm in winter. He wanted to help his mother live comfortably without spending too much energy or money. He wanted to use simple tricks and natural solutions. One evening, as he stood outside watching the sunset, Tom felt a strong sense of purpose. The valley below glowed with warm colors. The sky shifted between orange and red. The soft breeze touched his hair. He looked at the cabin with fresh hope. He knew that this was the beginning of a bigger change. His simple trick had shown him the potential of natural thinking. Tom promised himself that he would continue this journey. His small wooden cabin on the hill would become a place where summer heat and winter cold could no longer win. He would find a way to make the cabin stay balanced during every season. The boy with a quiet mind and observant eyes was ready to learn from the world around him. This was only the first chapter of his story. The next days would bring new ideas, new experiments, and new surprises. Tom woke early the next morning with the excitement of someone who had discovered something new. The cabin felt cooler than usual, and the soft morning air moved gently through the room. His small trick with the wooden boards had worked. It was a simple idea, but it made a real difference. Tom felt proud, yet he knew this was only the beginning. He stepped outside quietly while his mother slept. The sky was clear, and the first rays of sunlight touched the tops of the trees. Tom walked around the cabin and checked the shape of the wooden wind path he had created. He ran his hand along the boards to make sure they were steady. Some had shifted after a windy night, so he pressed stones at their bases to secure them again. Tom crouched near the back wall of the cabin and felt the cool air coming through the small gap. The breeze was faint but constant. This small stream of cold forest air was now entering the cabin naturally. Tom smiled because the idea came from simple observation and patience. He believed nature hid answers everywhere, waiting for someone to notice. After checking the boards, Tom sat on the grass and watched the forest. He listened to the wind brushing through the trees. It made a soft humming sound that he enjoyed. He noticed something interesting. The wind did not move the same way all day. It shifted directions depending on the time. In the morning it came from the forest, but during the afternoon the wind turned toward the valley. If he wanted the cabin to stay cool even in the hottest hours, he needed to understand these patterns more clearly. Tom decided to study the wind properly. He pushed a stick into the ground and tied a small strip of cloth to the top of it. He placed the stick near the cabin and watched the movement of the cloth. At first the cloth pointed toward the cabin as the wind came from the forest. Tom sat there for half an hour, just observing. He marked the direction of the wind with small stones placed on the ground. When the wind changed direction, he placed more stones. His mother walked outside with a cup of warm tea. She watched Tom working and smiled. She did not interrupt him because she knew he was learning something important. After a while, she called him softly and gave him breakfast. They sat together on the wooden steps of the cabin. She asked him what he was doing with the stones. Tom explained his plan in simple words. He wanted to know how the wind moved during the day. This way he could change the wind path later and make it work better. His mother nodded with pride. She always admired his thoughtful nature. After breakfast, Tom continued his study. He spent the entire morning watching the cloth tied to the stick. The wind direction remained steady, but around midday, it shifted. The cloth now pointed toward the valley. The cool morning air stopped flowing from the forest and instead moved across the hill, toward the cabin's front. Tom placed more stones to mark this second direction. He now understood that one path alone would not be enough. If the wind changed directions, he had to guide it from different sides. Tom walked around the cabin again, thinking carefully. The front of the cabin had a small porch and an open area where sunlight hit directly. If he wanted cool air to enter from that side, he needed to create shade and guide air upward. It was a harder challenge than the simple morning path, but Tom did not give up easily. He returned to the shed and looked for materials he could use. He found an old frame made of thin branches tied together. It had once been part of a broken garden fence. Tom carried it to the porch and placed it in front of the cabin wall. He set it at a slanted angle using stones. Then he went to the forest and gathered fresh leafy branches. He placed the leaves over the branch frame so that it created a natural shade screen. This leafy screen covered part of the cabin wall and blocked the strong sunlight. When Tom touched the shaded area behind the screen, it felt cooler than before. He continued adding branches until the shade became wide and thick. But he still needed a way to guide the afternoon wind toward the cabin. Tom walked around the front yard and looked for something light enough to redirect air. He found a long piece of bark that had fallen from a tree. It was curved like a shallow bowl. Tom placed the bark piece on its edge near the shaded frame. When the valley wind blew, the curve of the bark caught some air and pushed it toward the cabin wall. Tom stood back and tested the system. He waited for the wind to come again. When it did, he saw the cloth on the stick move and the bark shift gently. A small stream of wind flowed toward the shaded wall. Tom placed his hand near the gap between the porch stairs and the ground. He felt a touch of cool air entering, not as strong as the morning breeze, but still noticeable. The cabin was now receiving cool air from two different directions depending on the time of day. Tom felt proud of this idea because it made use of nature without needing anything expensive or complicated. By afternoon, the sun was very strong. Tom and his mother sat inside the cabin. Usually the heat at this time became unbearable, but today the room felt cooler. The air was not cold, but it moved gently and kept the cabin comfortable. Tom's mother looked at him with grateful eyes. She said that his simple tricks had already changed their daily life. This praise motivated Tom even more. He decided that he would improve the cabin for winter as well. If he could guide cool air inside during the summer, then maybe he could guide warm air inside during the winter. He wanted the cabin to stay warm without burning so much firewood. The next few days, Tom focused on refining his windpaths. He adjusted the angle of the wooden boards at the back of the cabin. He added more leafy branches to the shade screen at the front. He checked the direction of the wind every morning and evening. He kept marking patterns with stones so he would not forget. He noticed something new. When the wind came from the valley, it moved faster if it passed through narrow spaces between rocks. It created a gentle pressure that pushed the air forward. This gave Tom an idea. He collected flat stones from the riverbank and arranged them in a small curved wall near the bark windcatcher. The narrow space between the stones made the wind stronger when it passed through. That stronger air then moved across the shaded screen and entered the cabin more efficiently. Tom continued working each day. His mother often helped by holding boards or gathering leaves. She enjoyed watching her son think so deeply and plan so carefully. She told him that he had a mind that looked for answers even in silence. One evening, Tom walked up the hill and looked at the valley below. The sky was peaceful, and the soft pink light of sunset touched everything gently. The cabin behind him stood quiet and calm. He thought about how far he had come with only simple materials and natural ideas. He felt grateful for the world around him because it taught him lessons every day. Tom promised himself that he would keep improving. He still had to find a way to keep the cabin warm during winter. He wondered how animals stayed warm without fire or thick blankets. He decided to study them next. The boy who learned from the wind was ready for his next discovery. Tom's improvements to the cabin made the hot days easier to manage. His mother often smiled as cool air moved across the rooms. The cabin no longer felt like a warm box during the afternoon. Tom felt proud of his work, But now a bigger challenge stood ahead. Summer would pass, and winter would come again. Winter on the hill was long, quiet, and very cold. The cabin turned cold quickly, and they needed a lot of firewood to keep warm. Tom wanted to change that. He wanted the cabin to stay warm even when the frost covered the ground. If nature had answers for cooling, then nature also held answers for heating. Tom believed this strongly, so he decided it was time to study how warmth moved around the earth. One morning the air already felt cooler. Leaves on the trees changed their color slightly. Birds flew lower as if searching for comfort in the cold wind. Tom watched them and wondered how they stayed warm without thick blankets or fire. He followed a small bird to the forest. The bird landed near a group of tree roots and hopped into a tiny hole in the ground. Tom walked closer and touched the soil. To his surprise, the earth near the roots felt warmer than the air outside. The soil below the surface held warmth. Tom dug a little with his hand and felt the temperature change. The deeper he pressed his fingers, the warmer it felt. This discovery sparked a new idea in his mind. If the ground held warmth, then maybe he could bring some of that natural heat into the cabin during winter. Tom sat on the forest floor and thought carefully. He remembered how the cool morning air flowed under the cabin in summer. If cool air could enter through a small gap, then warm air from the ground might also enter in winter if guided correctly. He needed a new type of path, not for wind this time, but for underground warmth. He walked back to the cabin and studied the area behind it. The wooden wall at the back stood slightly above the ground. There was a space under it where air entered. Tom wondered if he could dig a shallow trench behind the cabin so that warm soil air could rise and enter that gap. It sounded simple, but he needed to be sure. Tom fetched a small shovel from the shed. He began digging a narrow trench behind the cabin, making it only as deep as his arm. The soil grew warmer as he reached deeper. He placed his hand inside and felt steady heat. It was not hot, but it was warm enough to make a difference in winter. He dug a long line across the back of the cabin. He shaped the trench so the rising warmth would gather in one place near the wall. Then he covered the top of the trench with flat wooden boards. He placed small stones on the sides so the boards would not fall. This created a hidden tunnel under the soil that collected natural warmth and directed it toward the gap. When Tom finished, he sat on the grass and looked at his work. He felt proud because the idea came directly from nature. The earth held steady warmth, and he had found a way to use it. For the next 2 days, Tom studied how the soil heated during cold mornings. He placed his hand near the trench cover and felt the temperature. He also checked the air inside the cabin each morning. At night, slowly he noticed improvement. Even though the outside air was cold, the inside of the cabin felt slightly warmer. Not warm enough for winter, but it showed that the idea worked. Tom shared the progress with his mother. She listened carefully and touched the back wall of the cabin. She agreed that the cold did not bite as sharply as before. She praised his effort and told him that simple thinking sometimes created strong solutions. Tom smiled shyly because her words encouraged him. Still, winter was not mild. It arrived quickly and brought heavy wind. The hill turned white with frost. The air felt sharp and cold. Tom watched as the cabin tried to hold warmth. The underground trench helped, but not enough. The cabin still needed firewood every evening. Tom knew that animals stayed warm during winter without fire. He wanted to learn from them, so he went into the forest again. He walked slowly and watched animals closely. Squirrels gathered dry leaves and stored them inside tree holes. Rabbits made nests in thick bushes lined with layers of grass. Every nest had something in common. They trapped warm air inside by using layers. Tom touched a pile of dry leaves under a tree. When he lifted the top layer, he felt warm air trapped beneath it. The leaves worked like a blanket. Tom gathered a handful and held them. They were dry, light, and warm on the inside. This gave him another idea. He returned to the cabin and studied the outside walls. The walls were thin and held no layer between wood and air. If he could create a natural layer between the cabin wall and the outside, warmth would stay inside longer. He thought about building a simple wall made of branches and leaves around the cabin. Tom began by collecting long branches from the forest. He placed them around the cabin at a small distance. He tied the top of the branches together using old ropes from the shed. This formed a ring around the cabin. Then he gathered dry leaves and stuffed them between the branch wall and the cabin wall. The leaves acted like insulation. They trapped warm air. Just like animal nests, he worked for hours, packing leaves into every space. He even placed leaves under the porch stairs and around the base of the cabin. When he finished, the cabin looked like it was wearing a natural coat made of branches and leaves. Tom stepped inside and felt the air. It was warmer than before. His mother touched the wall and felt the heat staying inside. She told Tom that winter would be easier because of his work. Tom felt a mix of pride and relief. The ground trench and the leaf wall together made the cabin hold warmth longer. The fire they lit during the evening now warmed the entire room for many hours. The cold wind outside no longer stole the heat quickly. Tom continued improving the cabin during the following days. He added more leaves when the wind blew them away. He shaped the trench to guide more warmth. He checked the windpiles from summer and blocked them during winter, so cold air would not enter. Every morning Tom woke up early and checked the cabin temperature. He sat near the door and breathed slowly. He felt warmth stay in the room even when frost covered the grass outside. His ideas were working. One night, Tom stepped outside to look at the stars. The cold air touched his face, but the cabin behind him stayed warm. He felt grateful for nature's lessons. He admired the earth, animals, wind, and trees because they gave him ideas without speaking a single word. Tom promised himself that he would continue learning. The cabin had already changed, but he knew he could make it even better. His simple tricks kept their home cool in summer and warm in winter, but he wanted to test new ideas. He wanted to see what more he could discover. The quiet boy who listened to nature had learned the secret of warmth, but his journey was not over. Something new was waiting for him in the next season. Winter grew stronger on the hill, and the cold wind became sharper with each passing day. Frost covered the grass every morning, and the trees stood still under the weight of thin ice. But inside the cabin, Tom and his mother stayed warm. Tom's underground trench and the wall of branches filled with leaves kept the cabin protected. The small home felt like a safe nest in the middle of a cold world. Tom woke early every day to check the trench, the leaves, and the walls. He made sure everything stayed in place. He added more dry leaves whenever he found empty spaces. He pressed down branches when the wind loosened them. His mother often watched him from the porch and admired his steady patience. She knew that this cabin was warm because of her son's quiet intelligence. But winter did not remain calm for long. One morning, the sky turned dark early. Thick clouds moved quickly across the hill. The wind changed direction and carried a heavy sound. Tom felt uneasy. He had lived on this hill long enough to recognize the signs of a strong winter storm. By the afternoon, the sky turned nearly black. Snow began to fall. The wind hit the cabin walls with force. Trees bent low, and dry branches snapped in the distance. The storm had arrived, and it was stronger than any winter storm the hill had seen in years. Tom rushed outside to check the trench and leaf walls. The wind pushed snow into the branches, and the leaves shook wildly. Tom's mother called out to him to come inside, but Tom wanted to make sure the cabin stayed safe. He pressed the branch wall with both hands. It held for the moment, but he knew the storm might damage it. Snow piled quickly. The wind blew harder. The storm howled like a wild animal. Tom ran back inside and closed the door. His mother placed warm tea in his shaking hands. The cabin trembled slightly when the strongest wind hit it, but the warmth inside remained. Tom sat near the fire and listened carefully. He felt responsible for the cabin. He felt responsible for their safety. The storm continued through the night. Snow covered the hill in a thick white blanket. The wind shook the cabin again and again. Tom stayed awake for many hours, listening for any signs of damage. He heard the leaves rustling outside. He heard branches tapping against the walls. He hoped everything would stay strong until morning. At dawn, the wind softened. The storm slowed down. The heavy clouds began to move away. Tom opened the door carefully and stepped outside. The entire landscape looked different. Snow was piled high. Many small branches had fallen from trees, but the cabin still stood, warm and steady. Tom walked slowly around the cabin to check his work. The leaf wall had shifted at certain spots. Some branches had fallen. Snow had filled a few spaces. The underground trench remained safe under the boards, but the path that guided warm air was blocked by snow. Tom felt a mix of relief and worry. The cabin was fine, but it needed repair before the next cold night. He picked up a fallen branch and placed it back in position. He removed snow from the leaf wall and packed new dry leaves into the empty gaps. He brushed snow away from the trench cover. His mother came out to help him. Together they worked carefully, not rushing, not panicking. The storm had tested their simple home, but they were ready to make it strong again. As Tom worked, he noticed something interesting. Even though the storm was harsh, the leaves that remained in place were still warm inside. He pulled out a handful and felt the heat trapped between the layers. This proved that natural insulation was working better than he expected. If he improved the outer layer, the cabin would stay warm even during bigger storms. Tom began thinking deeply again. The storm taught him many things. He learned that the leaf wall protected the cabin well, but it needed support from stronger materials. He looked around and saw fallen branches everywhere. Thick branches, long branches, strong branches. An idea formed in his mind. He decided to build a second wall around the cabin. A stronger outer wall made of thicker branches placed farther from the cabin. This new wall would take the first impact from wind and snow. The leaf wall would stay protected inside like a warm center. The cabin itself would remain untouched. He explained the idea to his mother, and she supported it with a smile. She told him that the storm had revealed where they needed improvement. Tom spent the next 2 days gathering strong branches. The storm had knocked down plenty. He chose the best ones and carried them to the cabin. He placed them in a large circle around the cabin, leaving enough space so he could still walk between the outer wall and the leaf wall. He planted the thick branches deep in the snow and soil so they could stand firm. Then he tied the tops together using rope from the shed. The new outer wall stood tall and strong. Tom walked around it again and again to make sure it stayed steady. Next, he filled the space between the outer wall and the leaf wall with more branches and dry leaves. This created a double layer of protection. The outer wall blocked wind and snow. The inner wall trapped warmth. The cabin now stood inside a natural shield, much stronger than before. When Tom finished, he stepped back and admired his work. The cabin looked different now. It looked ready for any winter challenge. His mother came outside and touched the new wall. She said the cabin felt safer than ever. That night they sat near the fire and enjoyed the steady warmth inside. The storm had passed, but the lesson it brought stayed with Tom. He realized that nature always gave warnings before trouble came. If someone paid attention, they could prepare and stay safe. The next morning, Tom checked the new walls again. They stood strong. No wind could push them easily. No snow could fall through them. He felt satisfied. But Tom did not stop thinking. He wondered how people in old times survived harsh winters without modern tools. He thought about caves, shelters, and old wooden homes. He believed that simple ideas from nature could be stronger than any machine. As he sat on the hill, watching the melting snow shine in the sunlight, he felt something growing inside him, a wish to improve things even more. He wanted the cabin to stay perfect in all seasons. He wanted to discover how nature balanced cold and heat. He wanted to learn more from the world. The storm had tested the cabin, but it had also strengthened Tom's resolve. He was ready for the next challenge. He was ready for the next discovery. This was not the end of his journey. Another idea waited for him, and he would soon find it. Leo woke early the next morning with a clear mind and a strong goal. The night had been calm inside the cabin. His trick with the vents, the thick wall section, and the air path had kept the rooms warm without fire. The quiet comfort gave him energy, and he stepped outside with confidence. The sky was bright, and the trees stood still as if they were waiting for the next decision he would make. He knew this was not the end of his journey. Many people in the valley lived in homes that were too hot in summer and too cold in winter. Some used too much fuel to stay warm and had trouble finding more. Some struggled in summer because simple fans were not enough. Leo had solved these problems for his cabin. The question now was if he could help others. Rami and Mir arrived soon after sunrise. Both looked excited to speak with him. Rami held a small notebook filled with sketches, and Mira carried a warm drink in a wooden cup. Rami smiled. I could not sleep. I kept thinking about your trick with the air path. I want to try building something like that for my own house. Mira nodded. Me too. I told my father, and he wants to see everything. He thinks we should show the whole village. Leo felt a small wave of nervousness. Showing the cabin to his friends was one thing. Showing it to the whole valley felt much bigger. But he remembered what he had learned. His idea had worked because he tried again and again. If the valley wanted to see it, then he had to let them. He smiled at his friends. If they want to learn, then we will show them. But we need to make everything clear. We must explain why it works. Rami stood taller. Then let us prepare. They spent the next few hours checking every part of the cabin. Leo walked around the roof and made sure the outer layer was firm. Mira cleaned the wooden boards near the cool vent. Rami checked the walls and made notes of the temperature difference in different corners of the cabin. The cabin looked simple from the outside, but when people would step inside, they would feel the warm air in the cold morning and the cool air in the afternoon. By noon, villagers started arriving. Old men, women, young students, and even travelers who had heard about the boy and his unique trick came walking up the path. The crowd grew around the cabin, and Leo felt a long breath rise through his chest. He had never faced so many people at the same time. A tall elder named Zamir stepped forward. He was known for his calm voice and wise thinking. He looked at Leo with kind eyes. We hear you found a way to keep your home warm in winter and cool in summer without using much fuel. We want to understand this idea. Can you show us? Leo nodded and opened the door for everyone. The first thing the visitors noticed was the comfortable warmth inside. The outside air was cold, but the cabin held a stable feeling that surprised everyone. People touched the walls, checked the ceiling, and whispered to each other. No part of the cabin felt too hot or too cold. Leo stood in front of them and began to explain. He pointed to the new thick wall section. Here the heat stays inside during winter. The wall holds the warm air and stops it from leaving. It also holds cool air during summer. He walked to the small ground vent. This path lets air rise and fall. When cold air comes from outside, it becomes warm inside. When hot air builds up, it leaves through the top. The cabin balances itself without machines. He showed them the roof layer. This layer blocks the strong sun. It keeps the inside cool during summer. In winter, it traps heat. Many villagers nodded as they listened. Some took notes. Some asked questions. Leo answered every question with clear and simple words. Mira and Rami helped explain small details and showed people how the vents moved. One visitor raised a hand. How did you learn this? You are young, but you built something very clever. Leo looked at the floor for a moment. He did not want to sound proud. He wanted to sound honest. I made many mistakes, he said. I tried things. Some ideas failed. Some worked. I kept changing small things until I found the right mix. The cabin taught me. The air taught me. The seasons taught me. The crowd grew silent for a moment. His words touched them. Elder Samir stepped closer. This is a gift for our valley. You did not keep your idea hidden. You shared it. And now many homes here can stay comfortable without wasting fuel or suffering from heat. Mira clapped with a bright smile. Rami looked proud of his friend. Leo felt the warmth of happiness settle inside him. He felt that his long work had reached a true purpose. The villagers began asking if he could help them build similar systems. Leo agreed, but he also taught them how to do it themselves. He wanted each person to understand the method. He walked from house to house over the next few days, showing them where to place a vent, how to strengthen a wall, or how to adjust a roof layer for better shade. He watched older builders smile as they learned something new from someone younger. Weeks passed, and the valley changed. Houses that once stayed unbearably hot in summer now felt cool during noon. Homes that used to lose heat in winter now stayed warm through the night. People used less firewood, and the valley became quieter and cleaner. One cold morning, Leo stood at the top of a hill overlooking the valley. He saw the smoke from kitchens, the steady roofs, and the happy movement of people walking with ease in the open air. Mira and Rami joined him. They stood side by side watching the village come alive. Rami nudged Leo. "Look at what you started." Leo took in the view. "I just learned from the land. The land always shares if we listen." Mira smiled softly. "Still, you were the one who tried. You were the one who kept going." Leo felt a deep sense of peace. He knew there would be more seasons and more problems in the future, but he also knew they would face them with the same spirit of curiosity and effort. A soft wind moved through the trees. The cabins below stood strong and balanced. The valley was ready for whatever came next, and so was Leo. He turned to his friends. "Let us see what we can build next." Together they walked down the hill with steady steps, ready for another new day in a valley that now lived with comfort and harmony. All because an outdoor boy trusted his simple trick and shared it with everyone.